Okay, it's 2 p.m. I'm gonna go ahead and call our budget workshop number 2 meeting to order. Just want to thank you guys for coming out, especially for our citizens that are in attendance today. And for the ones that can't make it, we are recording this meeting and it'll be available within 24 hours on our website. Also, Councilmember Nathan Chambers is absent again for this meeting. He had a pre-planned trip overseas with his family. So we hope he's safe, but he will be absent for this meeting. Nice weather outside, and hate to have you guys come in so we can talk about money and financials, but it's a necessary process, and we look forward to having some great discussion so we can work in the best interest of our constituents. All right, so moving right along, 2026, 2027 budget priorities post-survey results. Jewel?
Okay, can y'all hear me good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as everyone knows, we, well, as council and staff knows, the public may not be aware, we ran a budget priority pulse survey engagement online. And I have a presentation that shows you, it's going to show the results, priorities and comments and satisfaction of citizens, and then is also going to show how the proposed budget responds to those comments and priorities. Oh no, it didn't work. Is there a power button? Yep, it is not on. Okay. Okay, so this presentation is divided into 2 parts, and the first part is the results and what residents told us with those results. This is the engagement site that shows the, the face of the 2026-2027 budget, and there's different surveys underneath that when you click on it to go through. Also, budget documents and survey results are posted there. So for the survey, we had 388 views, 63 participants, 1,419 responses, 39 comments, and 30 subscribers. So with it being our first year and our first launch, numbers are kind of low, but that we expect that. We have, I'll show you at the end of this, we have some other engagements in public outreach in order to increase the participation hopefully next year. So here are the age ranges. And one of the big things we noticed is that we did not get any participants under the age of 25. So that's going to be a big focus next year, is to get more age groups participating in this. We did have some participants who had children under 18 in the household, but we want to get, those under 25 to also participate in the survey. So the first couple of questions in the survey ask about the overall satisfaction with taxes and satisfaction with the quality of services provided. 32%, which is the highest percentage, are somewhat satisfied. You can see the ranges go from very satisfied to very dissatisfied. The rating of our overall value received for tax dollars is average, 31% with the most there. Then the next couple of slides go over funding priorities by different categories. The first one, before I go into each individual one, on the far left is essential, must be fully funded. To the far right, which is I don't know, but before that one, it's not a priority, should not be funded. So from fully funded to do not fund, from left to right. So under economic development, there's two priorities listed: programs to facilitate economic growth by attracting new businesses, and programs that foster economic growth by supporting local and small businesses. The biggest percentage of responses for facilitating economic growth by attracting new businesses is 49%, and economic growth by supporting local and small, high priority, 53%. Emergency prevention, preparedness, and response. Preparedness and response to citywide emergency events. I'm on the left side of the far left column by the different priorities. Police, fire, and EMS emergency response, crime and violence prevention initiatives. All three of those had their highest rating was in the essential must be fully funded. Next one is recreational, creative, and cultural activities, and I will go one by one on this one. Well, actually, I'll go down all of them. Access to beaches, docks, and piers, access to quality parks, trails, and open spaces, access to recreational opportunities and programs, access to cultural events and programs, preserving live music and creative spaces. So all of those, the highest percentages were in the medium priority, important but not a top priority. Next one is transportation and critical infrastructure. First priority, condition and quality of city facilities, 48%, medium priority, important but not a top priority. Access to sidewalks, trails, and bike lanes, and then condition of streets, roads, and other transportation infrastructure. Both of those had the highest percentages, and essential must be fully funded. Water and sewer services and critical infrastructure. Condition and quality of water and sewer facilities, and then condition and quality of water and sewer services. Both of those highest percentage, essential must be fully funded. Next one, high performing government. And ensuring the city remains a competitive employer through salary and training opportunities, and then investment in technology systems to improve efficiency across city operations. Both of those got the highest percentage within medium priority, important but not a top priority. So after the different funding priorities, we asked about resident priorities and asked them to select their top two. And as you can see, transportation was selected number one the most, transportation and critical infrastructure, followed by emergency prevention, preparedness, and response. And then one other question we had at the end of that survey, we asked for citizens to, what would their budget prioritizations and comments, additional comments be, and some other items that maybe we should consider. And we had 3 comments on those. First one, lowering taxes and decreasing zoning to minimize high density housing development, sunset tax rates for senior residents and limited income, and then promoting individual liberty. And then the last the last section of the survey, we asked for some other budget planning consideration comments, and these were open. They feel free to write whatever they wanted. We had 36 participant comments, and then we tagged each of those comments within these 6 categories, and the comment could be tagged for more than one category, and there may have been a couple of comments that didn't get tagged into any of these categories. And you have the full listing of the comments in a handout at your place, and they're also fully listed on the engagement site. But the second part of this is going to go through some of those comments, highlight specific comments that kind of highlight what the first part of this survey told us as far as what the residents' priorities are, and then how our budget has responded to these. So residents told us their top priorities were transportation and critical infrastructure and water and sewer services. And as on the previous slides, overwhelmingly listed as essential and high priority, especially streets, sidewalks, and water and sewer infrastructure. Number 2 was emergency prevention, preparedness, and response. And they were scored as essential for the largest share of respondents. So for transportation and critical infrastructure and water and sewer services, under residents' pulse priorities, the little green box, these are specific, these are quoted comments, word for word, no spelling changes, no grammar changes, nothing. First one, attention must be given to sidewalks other than just at the waterfront, and they identify specific problem locations. The next one, the wastewater infrastructure and collection systems are falling apart and are one issue away from making national news. The Morehead City budget priority response to that, we have increasing sidewalk maintenance funding and prioritizes ADA accessibility, and the capital improvement plan dedicates funding to citywide street and sidewalk improvements, not just at the waterfront. In addition, it provides $10.84 million for water and sewer operations and non-operating needs, and continues a multi-year capital program focused on wells, tanks, treatment plants, and collection system rehabilitation. The second resident top priority, emergency prevention, preparedness, and response. Comments were increased fire and police personnel to meet needs of growth Morehead City is experiencing. And the primary responsibility of government is to protect constituents. Local governments accomplish this by funding police, fire, EMS. The Morehead City budget response to this is allocated approximately $17 million to public safety functions, making it the largest functional area in the budget, and maintaining strong staffing and equipment through the capital improvement plan support for police and fire EMS. So that covers the results of the top 2 priorities of those results. And we're going to go into the resident comments. So we had the 6 categories that we tagged the comments in, and like I said, they could be tagged for more than one category, and there was 1 or 2 that weren't tagged at all. The 6 categories being property taxes, finances, and transparency, city infrastructure and safety, recreation and cultural opportunities, economic development and vitality, natural resources and public access, fire and police personnel. So next few slides that we're going to see are going to show some of those comments and how the 2027 proposed budget addresses those for the top four number of comments made. So the first one, under property taxes, finances, and transparency, some of the comments were cut costs and lower taxes, please freeze spending at current levels, please use existing staff, websites, and social media to facilitate discussions and hold polls for a stop and review process, and always be transparency. The budget reduces total budget response to this, reduces total spending by nearly 3% from the current year, and trims approximately $8.5 million from departmental requests. Holds the tax rate at 0.3425 per 100 of value in order to continue funding of top-ranked priorities, streets, water and sewer infrastructure, and public safety. Includes expanded financial summaries and details of the budget priority pulse. And those are listed in the same order as responding to the comments above. City infrastructure and safety, comments were paving potholes rather than filling them with rock and putting an orange cone beside them. Attention must be given to sidewalks other than just at the waterfront. The walkability at Bridges Street is hazardous at best. The infrastructure of the city is in complete disarray, starting with city parks, trails, sidewalks, and roads. Then the water infrastructure and drinking water infrastructure are not adequate. The Morehead City's budget increases funding and transportation and POW bill accounts to support pavement and sidewalk work citywide. Total highways and streets funding is projected to grow about $1.65 million in fiscal year 2027, up from $1.44 million budgeted in 2026. The budget also prioritizes water and sewer operational reliability and capital rehabilitation through $10.84 million in funding, and the multi-year capital improvement plan that focuses on the wells, tanks, treatment plants, and collection system projects. Next one, recreational and cultural opportunities. Access to rec facilities for kids. We are missing huge opportunities to hold competitive tournaments. Please build a skateboard park and request for more sports fields, an indoor pool, and youth-oriented activities. Others noted that capital improvements for recreation facilities are a luxury, not a necessity, compared with core services. The Morehead City budget funds maintenance and improvements at the rec center and parks, including building repairs and upgrades, and sustains current program funding while the facility is under renovation. I did want to make a note here, and that's why it's in this response, that while the budget doesn't necessarily address additional recreational facilities or, new expanded programs, that is because of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that is underway. So, and that those will be considered as once that is complete and analyzed for the full results and any possible funding sources. The next one, fire and police personnel. Comments were increased fire and police personnel to meet needs of growth Morehead City is experiencing. The primary responsibility of government is to protect constituents. Local governments accomplish this by funding police, fire, and EMS. It goes on to say the second responsibility is to enact policies that encourage economic growth that will then lead to tax revenue to fund the government's operations. Morehead City's budget allocates approximately $17 million to public safety functions, and as we stated before, it's the single largest functional category in the expenditure summary. So those are just some of the comments of those top 4 tagged categories, and you have the full listing of the comments. And again, they are also at the Engage website. So how has the city's budget balanced these competing priorities? Because some residents are asking to spend less money on cops, reduce taxes, while others identify police, fire, EMS, and critical infrastructure as primary responsibilities of the local government. The budget does not fully satisfy requests for both lowering taxes, and significantly funding capital in multiple areas at the same time. But in order to balance these priorities, it holds the tax rate flat, funds priority capital, and reduces overall spending. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, we had a missed opportunity of participation for youth under 25, and probably some other areas also. Plus, we would like to get the more citizens participating in this. So some of our plans for next year include we're going to run 1 to maybe 3 brew and budget community conversation events, where we basically is open-ended discussion about the budget over coffee. We'll have whatever engagement surveys that we're doing at that time with us. Want to post some QR codes for those surveys. in different locations. Going to actually, it says budget survey kiosk. The kiosk will be there for any type of engagement or surveys, but we will have that at different locations, city facilities that participants can respond there. Going to look into getting more youth input, whether it's visiting schools, going to playgrounds, you know, we're going to figure out the best way to do that. And then also going to some of the community events, just to get participants there.
That's a great idea.
And again, lastly, you can find the full survey results and budget documents online at engage.moreheadcitynorthcarolina.gov. And that is the end of the presentation of the survey results.
Okay. Thank you, Jewel. Jewel, all of those ideas are great ideas to get more input from our younger citizens. I'm just going to make one suggestion, and this comes from a couple of citizens, because they mentioned that everybody's not on the web, and some people wasn't aware of our survey, but you guys done a great job for getting that out, and they commended us for that. They asked if we could just do mailers next year too, in addition to the online survey. That way we can just send it out with the water bills. I know they can probably get pretty costly, but I told them I would bring it up.
Yeah, we can look into, you know, somehow reaching those individuals that don't have access to computers. It may be best served that they come to some of those functions that we're doing, or come to City Hall and do it at the kiosk, because if, just to state, if we do a ton of mailers, somebody has to key all those in for the data results. You know, while a few, you know, we could maybe do a few, take them to people, or send them to specific people who maybe would want those. But if we did those citywide, that would lead into a lot of extra hours.
Yeah, absolutely. But we got some great feedback. Questions from the council?
I've got a question. I'm going back to your participants page, and I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. Now, we have a page on the website where citizens can go look. Is that what we're saying here?
Yes, where they can participate in these surveys.
So when I'm looking at 388 people saw it, okay? Now, 63 participants. So that's 63 citizens of Morehead City.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 1,400 responses. What does that exactly mean?
So each response by a participant is counted, because some participants, like at the very end, may not want to actually leave a comment, or if you have open-ended things in there, or if you allow them just to bypass a question, it doesn't count those. So what it does do is it counts each time they did respond to one of the specific questions.
Okay. And subscribers, what does that mean?
So at the end of the survey, don't even really have to do it at the end of the survey. You can sign up to get updates about the survey once it's completed, or, you know.
Okay, because my comment is, you know, we're looking at over 9,000 people in the city, and we're using a microcosm of people here to try to analyze some, you know, some things. So my suggestion is, I wanted to suggest getting it out to let people see, okay? Because as the mayor said, I didn't even know that was here. There's a lot of other people may not. Can we extend it so that people can make suggestions year-round? You know what I mean? In other words, give them a line if you think you have an idea that you think you'd like to work within the city. Give them a way to communicate to us in real time. You know, I mean, 63 out of over 10,000, over 9,000. I mean, great job. Don't get me wrong. The process is great. But 63 out of 9,000, I mean, that's pretty tough. Now, do you turn around and vote one time? Can somebody take the test more? I mean, not take the test. Can they,
The survey.
so can they take the survey more than once?
So it will allow the person to take a survey more than once, but after so many times, it won't let them. But what it does do is it consolidates those comments on one line. So, for instance, when you pull down the results, there was a participant that did the survey 3 different times. It consolidates them on one line, as if they only responded one time.
But if they hadn't done it the third time, it'd look like they was picked them up twice, right?
No, because, well, that depends. It also detects whether you're doing it from the same IP address or not. So if you're not putting in a name, so if you're not putting in your name and email, but you're doing it from the same IP address, it's not going to let you do that. You can do it from the same IP address if you're two separate people.
Well, is this even possible? That we could have a bank of all the voting citizens in Morehead, and as they vote in, their name comes off the list? I mean, is there something that could happen like that?
So say that to me one more time.
If everybody in here had their own name, they're a citizen, when they go to log in to take the survey, they put their name in and then they can't take it anymore, but they've been registered as taking it.
Yeah.
Yes, it will do that. With this being the first time, we didn't want to force somebody having an account, because some people might want to respond and make comments anonymously. And if you force them to register, then they're no longer anonymous. Even though we're not sharing the names with anybody, it's still not fully anonymous.
Well, no, these were just, no, I like what you all are doing, I'm just saying, let's kind of tweak it for the next time.
And I got a quick question. Does it segregate out whether the person actually lives in the city or not? Or can someone
Yeah.
in Newport come there and actually do the survey?
So for this one, the way we set it up is it asked some questions at the beginning.
Uh-huh.
It actually had the map above the questions with the streets and everything. And it was actually that planning provided it that shows in, corporate limits versus non-corporate limits. So they had the map right there when they were answering, and they could answer whether they were a resident.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were a resident, then it asked, do you own, do you rent, or do you have a business here? And if you have a business here, do you just own property that someone else operates a business in, or are you also, or do you run the business there,
Right.
but don't own the property, or do you do both? So depending on the questions that you ask, and it also tags it, geo-tags where people are answering from, so you
Okay.
can see where they are.
Yeah.
So there's different ways you can pull down this data to see how it's responding.
It cuts them off, you can't go through the whole
They still can.
thing in certain responses.
Thank you very much.
Now, how does it capture a second homeowner?
A second homeowner,
Person that owns a summer cottage, they pay taxes, they do live here,
mm-hmm.
They don't vote. How does it capture that type of more complex interaction?
I would have to remember the exact first couple of questions. And I don't have those with me. But I know they could say, they own property, but they don't necessarily live here, something like that. But I can't 100% answer that question
That
without
would
going
be
back.
Important information for us to know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only piece of paper I got is this,
He didn't get the handout.
not that one out there. No, I don't have that.
Yeah, you do now.
I do now. Thank you. I was trying to figure out what I'd done with it.
I was trying to take mine.
He's got one.
Yeah.
All right. The comment about mailing out the survey with the bill. Unfortunately, the U.S. Post Office is at 75 cents a stamp. And if you listen to the federal government, they're talking about $1 at the beginning of the year. While mail ensures you get coverage that the survey is sent out, I don't know that it will encourage people to send it back when they're having to put the 75 cents.
That's true.
So, I think we're gonna be awfully stuck with the idea that we have to use our IT people to send out the surveys and retrieve the answers and organize. I think mail is great, but I think it's getting prohibitive.
Well, the software itself, when you're answering it, it's an online engagement software. And so it, categorizes, sums up all the numbers for you. So by using directly responding in the software, nobody has to really organize the data other than pulling down different types of reports or extracting data, which we did. So, but if you do a mailing, then somebody has to key that in.
Yep, that's an additional cost. But I'm just reminding you that mailing something with your bill is not free.
Yeah. And we did share this out on social media and on our website and all that. But as we get more people participating in surveys on this engagement software, for all the different projects, more people will be aware of it. And I think that alone will, not saying that's all we're going to do, because that's definitely not, but that alone will also give us, some growth.
So, Mr. Randy and Jewel, I'm gonna read this statement from the Balancing Competing Priorities. To balance these priorities, it holds the tax rate flat, funds priority capital, and reduces overall spending. So is that, the consensus you guys got from the survey?
So that isn't, that is how the city budget responds to the comments. That's not what we got out of the survey. What we got out of the survey was the question, the competing priorities of individuals to lower taxes, but, some were saying, more police and fire personnel, invest more in, infrastructure, like, do more paving, sidewalks, streets, water and sewer, even though water and sewer isn't necessarily related to taxes. So those are two completely competing priorities: lowering taxes, so you're receiving less money, but, spend more money on infrastructure. And so this is how the budget kind of responds and tries to balance those two items.
Yeah, there's definitely a camp on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
And always will be, from my experience, and you just have to balance that, but you're not gonna get unanimity of that across the board on pretty much those, as Jewel said, they're competing. You can't have both cake and eat it too, as they say, entirely. You can have some of both, and that's where I think, just a couple of comments on a survey of this nature, if I might, and then we can continue additional comments and questions. But one, I applaud the city for pursuing this. This is exactly what the community, I think, overall wants to see us doing, is engaging the citizens in and giving them opportunities for input that's easy and quick. I'll acknowledge that, and that's good, and different people are gonna respond different ways. Yes, there's pitfalls. You've got to take what you get in terms of with a grain of salt, as they say, because there are definitely people who might try to manipulate for, self-interest or whatever. So I really am impressed with this, the capabilities to try to filter that out, though. I think realistically, it's good to set a goal, and if I had to set a goal today of what I'd like to see in this, as Councilman Walker pointed out, with 10,000 people, you would hope for several thousand responses. I'd be tickled if we had 10 times what we got this year. You get what you want is in surveying of any type is a broad representation that's reflective of the overall community. And anyone who's studied the statistical side of it, surveys are notorious to have a very, very low percentage of respondents, typically those who are motivated to do so for whatever reason. But somehow, if we can make it easy enough, we hopefully can get a more reflective balance of all those people who don't normally do this. So I'd love to see us set a goal this year, administratively at least, try to get tenfold increase by outreach and going to these events and catching them with a kiosk where they might take the time to engage and do whatever we can to help those who are restricted in terms of how they can respond, being mindful of costs and those kind of things. But if you mail out a survey, I've forgotten the exact number, but it used to be, don't expect more than 2 or 3% response.
Right.
It just doesn't happen very often, particularly if they've got, as Councilman Taylor pointed out, if they've got to pay something to do it. That even further restricts the likelihood that people will. But those are just some observations. I like this. I think it's a step in the right direction, but we always have to take it and temper it with, it's helpful information, but it's not the end-all, be-all of everything. It's just one more piece or tool that we have to give this board information so that you can make as informed a decision. Because you're also going to have those individual interactions with people at the grocery store and on the street and campaigning and all the other ways you interact with people. And so I just balance it all, but at least you have something where at least a group of people put together responses that are helpful. Honestly, I was really pleased to see that what I would have listed as the top priorities of a local government, and I think a student of government would see them in the textbooks, that the priority services are those public safety, public utilities, water, sewer, garbage collection, all of those kind of things are what people recognize as high priorities, with other priority areas that you do, but they're less important, less required that you do those to be a fully functioning community. So it seems to be reflective of that reality, I guess is the best word, that we all face.
Yeah.
I think a couple of observations I have is the responses we got back in the areas of public concern, I think we're dead on what we would hope to get back.
I would think so.
The community.
Yeah.
But the occasion was when I read the statement that this person felt that we were not doing well in providing utilities.
That was puzzling.
That is a puzzle to me. That's one that I would like, when you're looking at it later, to consider doing a deep dive into that question. I'd like to know what that was based on. Have they had, maybe we dug up a water drain and we haven't filled it in, and they've had that rough road that we've seen all over town due to not being able to get the paving done. Is that what they're seeing? Or are we having some type of drainage or plumbing problem that we don't understand?
And
How can we do a deep dive on those, quote, surprises
Is
to
there
get more information?
yeah, I was gonna say, is there, and I swear I do, it seemed like to me, I remember doing the survey myself. But is there I don't remember, is there a comment section under each question that you could, have an opportunity to address that?
So, there can be. So that's one of the really good things about, I mean, this is great tool, and you can set it up any way you want to. So we did not add those.
Uh-huh.
This was the very first engagement we
Yeah.
did with this software, and so we were kind of learning, so I'm actually writing that down right now, because that's a good idea. Why did they answer
Right.
the way they answered?
Bill,
Um,
we're all assuming that they know what public utilities are.
Well,
No, I think it's a great
Hopefully
idea.
they're not on a septic tank or sewer issue.
but that one just struck, you know.
But
Yeah.
that's a good point, and maybe we could even add a comment, if you have follow-up on any specific issues you have that you want us to follow up with you, please indicate by checking this
Yeah.
box and give us your contact information, and we can do that.
And I-
These surveys that we sent out to recognize to the citizens of our town that we saw it, we read it, you know, we reacted in some way. These become topics that our PIO person should take on to educate as to issues that we may have, you know, assuming there's a problem, that we ought to be talking about issues, how we're gonna fix it. Or is it just education that they don't understand? Maybe we have a capital program that hadn't, you know, come to fruition. So this is a tool that helps us educate the public in real time.
There are, and Liam might have to help me remember this, there are a couple of cities that have been using this software for a long time. And so, you know, they have some great tools on it. And, you know, one of the towns has pretty much like just kind of a facts page and what's going on, to like, you know, some of the common questions or the common issues that they're dealing with at that time and explaining it. So there's lots of stuff that you can kind of do in that to educate, to have a conversation, to engage.
Yep. It's all about creating a balance, like Mr. Randy was saying, because we have various opinions. I know when I was campaigning, a lot of citizens were concerned about the property tax rate because of the revals that the county did and had their properties doubled and tripled. But then on the other hand, I'm reading these comments and I'm reading that some citizens are saying increase fire and police personnel to meet needs of growth Morehead City is experiencing, which is very true, and we did that last year. But then on the flip side, you got others that say, you know, don't add any new positions, keep taxes low. So it's like a balancing act. But we did accommodate the citizens last year with the fire and police personnel. And I can understand, because I always say that public safety is the most essential function of government. And I know our chiefs, they're looking for more resources so they can perform at a high level.
I didn't know, did you see the chief's little antennas pop right there when that was?
But yeah, we have some great public safety departments and definitely want to keep them functioning on a high level. So like you said, Mr. Randy, it's all about creating a balance. But this tool is awesome to do this survey. I don't know any other municipality in Carter County that did something like this for the budget season. So Jewel, kudos to you and your department. It's an amazing tool.
This and that tool we used at the last workshop, I think, are two that's gonna serve us well. One other comment I failed to mention, Councilman Walker brought it up about use of this tool for other things other than the budget cycle. That's something I'd already thought about and raised. I hope we can figure out a manageable way to do this periodically for big ticket type things, to give you that additional data, which you can use in any manner you have, either to justify a request or refute a request, or you can better explain it when you're debating those competing interests on what you are faced with, because it is a challenge to balance it. When you've got people in your ear saying two opposites. It's really tough to make it, but that's what you're here for, is to represent the entire electorate, all the constituencies and interests to the best of your ability, knowing it's an impossible task to satisfy everyone on everything.
And I know, the police department obviously has a community engagement they do quite frequently, which is coffee with a cop. A fire department has it too. I don't know if it's drag a hose with a fireman or what, but I guess what I'm saying is, as a result of those, you know, they could bring back that information back to the head shed as to what their key needs are, and then we could do something citywide. I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, maybe use the results of what they had to incorporate some of these surveys. I certainly like the idea of going out into the community. I think that's a necessity, and I think it's a good thing, and I think it's something that obviously we all up here really probably couldn't participate, but one or two of us could go to each one of them.
Absolutely.
And be there as well. So
Yes.
I think it's a good thing.
There is a caution that I think we as councilmen have to have. When you listen to the comments, it talked about adding. When I think we need to put more emphasis in this time when tax rates are higher than some people would like. This is trying to find that balance. Our first goal as council and staff should be looking first at efficiency and technology, not the addition of people.
Well said.
Because otherwise, there is an imbalance. You can't add people to meet a problem unless you make sure that what you have is being used as effectively as you need to do.
Yep, to its capacity.
And
Like
I
you're
think
saying.
we've got to be real careful to make that our first objective and tell people, community, what we're doing to make it more efficient, so they're aware of it.
Yeah.
And then when you ask the survey the next time, we'll find out whether the efficiency.
I agree. You're saying, Councilman Taylor, get more out of our employees that we have now and the positions we have now
We
versus
got-
adding new positions.
We got over 200 people working.
That's true.
for us.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of people for a town of 10,000.
It is.
So I think we have to dedicate ourselves as council and as staff and department. Our first priority should be looking at efficiency. And then see what, if we have to add people, we have to add people. That's the cost of doing business.
I agree. And Councilmember Abel gave me a great idea. We were talking about community events and promoting this survey tool, Jewel and Mr. Randy. I think National Night Out will be a good platform.
Yeah.
A lot of people attend that event, and, you know, it's hosted by our police department, Chief Dixon, and having kiosks out there for people to go ahead and click on the link and they can fill out the survey. Yeah.
Yeah,
When
and-
we talk about kiosks, I don't remember buying any kiosks. What do you define as a kiosk? And how many have we got?
I'm gonna say, and Matthew, while you're thinking, we've used them at the college, and it's no more than could be like a tablet attached to a pedestal that has those questions up, that anybody can go up there and input their information. Now, go ahead, Matthew. Oh,
We think it's
So-
simpler than that.
It
Oh,
actually, two things going on at the same time that came together and ended up being really good. So we have been, you know, Daniel and the police and, you know, other departments have been wanting to do some type of digital signage in, you know, some of the buildings and everything. And, you know, we've been working on this survey and, you know, wanted a place where people could come and actually do it, maybe don't have access to a computer. Matthew came to talk to me about digital signage just as I was kind of wrapping up these results and started thinking about kiosks. So we actually, are we on order? Is there on order? So there are 2 little countertop kiosks, and they're portable. So everything is in the software to run it. It does digital signage and does public engagement stuff. So it's not, you know, one purpose. So it's not, if you're not running a survey, it just sits there. It can be used for, you know, notifications, you know, city events, all, you know, council meetings, all kinds of things. So we have 2 small ones coming. We also have 2 that are kind of on a, almost like a 32-inch monitor on a stick that rolls with the battery pack. So it's completely portable. And then one more that's a little bit taller. It's not battery packed, but you can still use it in other places. And all of those, not only can you do these engagement things, but they also work as digital signage. So
Should there be staff with a person to encourage people to come in, sort of like you go to the fair and somebody wants you to take your turn on knocking the bunnies off the shelf? You know, you encourage people to come in and state their piece. Would we get more effectiveness if we put these out standalone or staff?
So I can't really answer that because some people want to do the surveys anonymous. For the ones that would be like kiosk here in City Hall, we wouldn't necessarily have anybody, you know, standing there. So that, you know, but when we do like the budget and brew conversations, or take the little ones to the community events, we're not going to hover over the person, but, you know, we would be like, here, you know, take the survey. So, you know, those kind of would be, have somebody there to answer any questions or to assist without, you know, because you don't want to stand behind them while they're doing it either, because you want them to feel free to be completely honest and open. So
A footnote to that is we have places where there are a staff person very close by, like going in the rec center. You got a desk there that's typically staffed at events and that kind of thing. And of course, the other thing is when you started out, you might want to do that periodically, or put a sign or note there that says, if you have questions on how to do this, step next door and that person will come out and help you, assist you if you need it. So I think there are ways to promote it. And we might even want somebody like the city manager or Mayor Pro Tem to stand there every once in a while and tell people, why don't you do this, fill this out, so we'll get your input into the next
See,
city
Randy,
budget.
I was gonna be nice. I thought it was an opportunity to meet the new city manager.
Yeah,
That you need to be standing
fine.
there.
I can do it. I can do it. I don't mind. I'll do my hour if you will. But that kind of thing, I think early on promoting it either through social media or other methods, through our PIO, we can hopefully engage. Because I think that's a real opportunity. When Jewel described this scenario to me, I thought it was right on. This is cutting edge. As somebody said, I don't think a lot of communities have embraced this to the extent they will in the future. But Morehead City, I'm really pleased to see them out front setting the standard, because I think this is what, particularly generationally, there's a lot of folks already doing this kind of stuff everywhere else, and they're eager to have the opportunity to do it with their local government if you give them a platform.
Absolutely. And Harvey had a great idea about doing it year round.
Yeah.
You know, I know National Night Out is what, October? So yeah, doing it year round.
You could have it on based on just whatever you package it at. I think the flexibility's there to do that fairly easily.
But you got to have that QR code, because there's a bunch of people, that's the only way they want to do it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
It's true.
If they can do it on their phone, they'll do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Council, any other questions regarding the survey? Okay.
You wanna, I don't know if you wanna move on, Mayor, or take a break, and then we can,
We can go ahead and just move on real quick into the budget discussion.
I
Yeah.
may need to take a break.
Are you gonna take a break?
If you.
Okay, yeah,
I
we,
think there's a hint.
we'll, I'll take it. We'll take a 10-minute break and return at 3:05.
Thank you, sir.
You gonna go?
I was gonna walk out anyhow.
Use your bottle here, man.
That's pretty nifty.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
don't think
think it is as
everybody
well.
can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Good Lord.
But I would have thought Suey wouldn't have been.
That's somebody disgruntled about something.
Okay.
To make it night, I won't make it night, I will be there tomorrow night, because I'm gonna go to our planning board meeting here.
Harvey, now you
I know.
That's what Wanda told me last night, Terry. Wanda said preach a panel.
He was a very good communication. If you get a chance, if not, either way, we'll have it tomorrow night. We even have a meal tomorrow night. So if you want to come, we either do a meal at 6, and then we eat, and then right afterwards, we
That'll
go
be
into-
perfect.
That'd
Yeah, I'll
be
probably
good.
just come
Won't
tomorrow
have to do either one, brother.
Oh, thank
Mayor,
you.
Sharp.
Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Jim. Some of them survey results say give Daniel Williams more money.
I know, well, some of them surveys said Daniel Weeds better tighten up.
What I saw where it says, giving you more money, I said, that must have been Reed. Just the rest.
Two cups of water at lunch and then a bottle of water here, did me. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I'll give you a button.
Okay, I'm just trying to get y'all out here early.
I know. I just figured it's a good button.
That's what I was gonna say.
Everything good?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That was good
that's a
discussion.
real good discussion.
You think? Yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, when he said we got a problem with utilities, maybe he don't know what utilities are.
Those two big ones. $2,000.
This is it. We don't know who's, we don't know who.
Figure out a way to.
Yeah, but, you know, where? Swansboro.
Thought about it events.
Second road to the left.
Just tell us what they think.
Bison Blue,
What are
take
ways
in
we
the
can
Old Rock,
improve?
Bison Blue, see.
Yeah, go to the Morehead Road, take the second right, and third left from the third road there.
Radio.
That's a good idea, having the Bison Blues, the table set up.
John Pope's already got his,
So now when I
money
saw the
dispensers
numbers
down
out
there.
Exactly.
We'll just put them beside the.
Put it beside it and fill it out, and that'll be exactly right. I thought about that, but that would be a, because we need that. How can we better make this a better experience? I think people appreciate it. Yeah, yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I actually thought about why not, maybe we get the tourism folks to buy in, do it at the visitor
At the
center where it
1%.
can be locked up when they're there, so it's, we can just have it exclusive within, so nobody steals it or damages it or whatever. But you could get all kinds of input from people that might help us do a better job of being a tourism destination. Yeah, yeah. With a hot dog. With a hot dog. $5 hot dog. Yeah. All right. Anyway, we're getting there. Good job. Good to Thank you, though, Mayor. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Randy.
I didn't want to leave on my own. They thought I'd have resigned. Yeah, but anyway, okay. I'll see you. Good job, Joe.
Yeah, but he's a real good speaker, brother. It'd be worth your time to come. You get, he,
That was good.
does
That
it.
was good.
He's a good preacher.
Well received. Good job.
A very good preacher. He preaches at the park, it's called Parker Chapel.
I had 2 bottles of water at lunch, and I had
Yeah,
that
he on the,
sitting here
first
saying,
free will
hey,
Baptist
what have I done? I
denomination.
drank myself into it.
Yeah,
He
'cause I know
even
that's-
teaches at,
Squeeze
is
here.
it called Southwestern,
Like
Southwestern
everybody else
College?
needs to.
There in, is it Wendell maybe? He preaches at the Christian college there. He's one of the professors there. Plus he's a full-time pastor. And I tell you, he is, man, he's on the mark. Whoa.
See what, Harvey, he be coming up with some good ideas, though. He be coming up with some good ideas. I had some people ask me, they said, who came up with that idea of, when y'all chose, when y'all appointed Nathan James, who came up with the idea of, every councilman picking 2 candidates? I started a lie, I said, well, me. I said, no, that was Harvey. They said, man, that was genius. Matter of fact, some people in Morale, they had to do the same thing. They just appointed somebody, and one of them was like, we might have to steal that and use that.
Absolutely.
I
Perfect.
said, yeah, that was Councilman Walker.
Perfect, man. Yeah.
You should have copyrighted that. You got to copyright
He
that.
said it's called the Walker method.
Yeah, the Walker method. I like that. I like that about people.
Danny.
Oh, yeah.
Is
Okay.
the price right
Unless
in
they've
the
got more.
capital list
No, I was
for
talking about
utility vehicle police at
Next steps,
90,000?
what they want to do.
Huh?
Yeah.
I think we're getting ready to start back up.
Really?
Hey, young lady.
The questions that
So we spend 30,000 up?
you populate them from the budget, is that what I'm saying?
So the priorities and everything,
Mhm.
for those, no, they were kind of, with this kind of being our first time, we
Mhm.
kind of looked at different other cities.
Well, I'm sure that case thing,
Right.
Who they're using, obviously, all of our specific, some of the stuff we don't do.
Right.
So then we tried to tailor it to.
Then,
We
But you
appreciate your
got-
input.
because you know you can sell
yeah.
it
Exactly, exactly.
at clients.
And we want to try to avoid that if we can.
And then,
Well, the early Durangos were not,
I did everybody good.
they were John Doe citizens.
When you talk about CIP, the former supervisor, that was like 20.
Can we get more mileage?
But is that funded by the water bills, or is that?
That-
But it's in the city budget.
So it's.
It's in, it's in that specific
You mean-
fund.
No, it's not, if you're referring to pay the tax numbers, no, but
Hey,
it's
Sarah,
part of the entire.
thank you for your information.
Yes.
It's part of the complete.
After
The
I got my
42
pen, I
million
figured it out.
is-
But you,
Well, if we got rid of,
Yeah, or whatever.
yeah. No, I got it the day after that you sent me that, and now that I've got that, I figured it out, but I couldn't do it until I had that. But it is a nice tool. It's very
when
nice.
I saw the
Got it
90,000,
all figured out, doing good. I tell you, I still just like writing. I mean,
Yeah, we treat it like a business enterprise.
Yeah,
That's
but
why
what I
it's
like even better,
separated
you
out.
just erase it. If you don't do very, just go there and
Yeah.
erase it and rewrite it. So
Yeah.
I have been really using it. Very nice tool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is a good distinction that a lot of people don't get.
particularly in fire.
So it went out in the newsletter, pushed out to different areas, social media, so I went.
Daniel was saying more like the other pits and tornadoes and things like
It's a learning curve.
And it may very well be.
And electronics.
Okay, it's 3:05, recess has ended. Returning back to our session, and, item number 3, budget discussion. Mr. Randy.
Yes, just a couple of introductory remarks that I would make from a manager's perspective. Nothing has changed from the last time in terms of the manager's recommended budget that was presented to you and delivered to you, and we've had one discussion on that, and one public board discussions, and then a number of individual contacts and follow-up discussions have occurred. But that basically is intact. We have done additional research at some people's request, and you've been shared information that I believe would be good topics for what I had recommended, that post this budget being finalized, however it works out, I think the board and management would like to engage in an in-depth analysis of service levels and tying that back to how that impacts on the budget and so forth going forward. Particularly given the squeeze that we had this year for my involvement, I really need that. I need the opportunity to engage with department heads individually and collectively to evaluate their operations. I'm calling it a reset. Is what I look at it as, if you're familiar with that use of that term. I'd like to see, as a lot of people get into these weight loss and other programs, I've got a family member that's doing that right now, and it's referred to as a reset. So I think it would be healthy for the city management. In my case, it's a catch-up learning curve. Thank goodness I have the history there that speeds that process up, but it's still getting current. I need that opportunity with the departments and with the staff to do that internal evaluation and assessment, and then, of course, engage with the city council to do that collectively as a body on the level of services we're providing, the resources we're putting into it, because all of it has a cost and an impact on budget, and we do this out of the budget process, as we discussed at the last meeting. But for those tonight that are here that weren't here, that would be my recommendation, regardless of how we end up getting to the bottom line of this year's budget. I think that's a necessary activity that will produce positive results, if it's nothing more than all of us being better informed, and our citizens as a byproduct get better informed, and we're better able to respond to their concerns with accurate and assessments, as well as a collective voice. Hopefully, we'll all be advantaged by having the information that helps us answer people's concerns. I think the mayor made a good point earlier. Scrutiny on topics indirectly, sometimes it's related to what the current events are. If you have a particular project you're looking at, otherwise it could be like the county revaluation. That certainly always seems to engage the dialogue in a different level on particularly the property tax equation and how the valuation process and so forth. That wanes a little bit as the years go on, and then it pops back up when that next one happens. And so I think that's realistic. But in between then, there's a lot of other elements of the budget, including utilities and rates and charges of those kind of items that we've talked about, as well as levels of service that people desire that we just finished talking about. This survey points out. So that's just one suggestion. As far as current events, the staff stands ready to provide any additional analysis. You've received some that went into certain elements of operations that are topics for those discussions, like part-time, overtime, personnel. As we know, and as the data reflects, operations are greatly impacted in the area of personnel and benefits and all the things associated with that, like overtime and so forth. Those are key areas, but that comprises a major percentage of our operating budget. So I don't know how much you want to get into those topics detailed today, or defer them till a more in-depth, deep dive analysis that I plan to do from a manager's seat with getting feedback directly from each department on it. But that's just one aspect of their operations. Particularly if technology and whether it's AI or whatever that be, form it takes, is going to have an impact on the future of operations significantly, in my opinion. Some good, some may not be perceived that good, but reality is we've got to learn to do more, better with less. But it may be that if we have better tools, input of information like we just talked about with surveys and other activities that could have been really time-consuming efforts in the past, may be less intensive. We just saw an example in our recent Public Safety Committee, not to digress, of the use of technology, of drone assistance for our public safety operations, and how that can save time and effort and produce maybe even better results than the traditional effort of going around checking the buildings and by a person, either on foot or in a vehicle. That certainly raises my antenna that there may be ways to do it easier and better that we haven't taken full advantage of. So I hope you join me in seeing that view to where we go next with operations and budgeting. Budgeting is something where, again, I've mentioned before, we're projecting costs and needs for the next 12 to 18 months, depending on when the budget activity gets started in terms of putting together numbers. We're at a loss for a crystal ball to predict the future of the economy and all the other factors that impact on at least a major portion of our revenues. And so that's an ongoing thing. We go through this exercise every spring to early summer of adopting a budget that's going to change and modify almost immediately by things that we don't always control, whether that be legislative action or other actions. So I would like to say that this is an ongoing budget process that will be refined throughout this fiscal year and beyond by the new team we've now got together that I'm included in, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to carrying that to fruition and hopefully have good results. And if nothing more, we want to at least have a better informed electorate and a better informed city council and management on what the opportunities and challenges going forward. Those things said, we stand ready administratively to carry on today in any areas that you want us to respond to with regard to options of your next steps. We had listed a third session later before the budget public hearing and process concludes in June, that we certainly stand ready to try to produce any documentation. It was listed as if necessary, so that'll be another judgment you certainly want to make before you end today's session as to whether you're going forward with that or want to do otherwise. And I'll stop and answer any questions. Jewel stands ready to review documents that we've produced. Some of you have given us individual input on what you'd like to see and what you feel next steps should be. But I think it's timely, if you agree, Mayor and Council, that you discuss next steps together before we conclude today so that we can all be on the same page.
Absolutely, Mr. Martin. Mr. Randy, I heard you speak of current events, and speaking of current events, I know this took place last year, but citizens are still affected by this process that took place last year, and that's the property revaluations that were administered by the county. And I have to educate a lot of our citizens that the city, the municipality sets the property tax rates, but we don't have control of the property values. And I know some citizens get that confused from time to time. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of their properties have doubled and tripled from the last reval. And I anticipate that the county's gonna do another reval in 4 years from last year, which probably, what, 2029? So in between that period, until the next reval, which with the next reval, property values possibly could go down. But in the meantime, can we come up with some sort of alternative to alleviate the property tax burden from our constituents? And you guys did a great job not proposing any increase, but is there any wiggle room for a decrease and a reduction of the property tax rate?
Initial response I'd give would just a qualifier, if you will, Mayor. And you and I have had this discussion, but I'm glad to share it publicly. I think, budgets are like anything else. They're a long-term projection of needs and desires that can and should change as those conditions change. However, one thing you do not have the luxury of doing is deferring and reconsidering some matters such as the property tax rate. You're required to set it within the specified time frame, and that's where we're at. And so that's a significant disadvantage in terms of flexibility, but it's the only practical way that it can work. And it's based on property that exists the January 1 prior to when you do it for this fiscal year. So it's already been set, what the values are, and the county and staff have interacted with that information. Purely the county's call in setting those values. And yet whatever rate we establish, it will be based on the values as of the prior January 1. So that's not going to change, and neither is the rate once you've established it. Then specifically, we have, things do change as you move along in this process, and there have been a few minor items that we have taken a look at that wouldn't necessarily be a disadvantage going forward. Because one of the things I always advocate with elected officials in considering the property tax rate for the coming fiscal year is to make sure that we try to avoid the pitfall of doing something this year that might have an adverse impact on future budget years. So, it's, again, I'm not talking crystal ball, but if you, for example, adjust a rate, whether it be the tax rate or any other rate, we talked a little bit about this at the last meeting, that has implications for what the rate will be next year. And we talked about the model that we now have access to make projections real time and adjust and show you what the net impact based on our current data would be of those kind of changes. We do know some other facts, such as a penny on the tax rate is a little over $400,000 in net estimate that we have for how much tax could be paid for each penny. And you can do the math as to how that goes all the way through it. We also know that property tax is our #1 revenue source for the general fund, which funds all of the programs that return very little money to the city in terms of revenue. They're all deficit operating programs. That's just the nature of them. We don't charge if we go to answer a police call at a residence. We don't charge if the fire and the EMS, I'm talking about a user fee for any of those kind of services, like you do in some of the other programs. But we fund all of those out of that general fund, and I think we said it was almost 75% of it is made up of property taxes and sales tax, which are two direct revenue sources that the citizens in varying degrees provide us with to operate on each year. And they're all based on estimates. The property tax is less fluctuating than the sales tax, certainly, but that is the most reliable revenue source we have. So all of those things said, there's room for adjustment if the board so chooses. However, I would strongly advocate against any adjustments that are going to be worsen our situation in terms of next year, a penny on the tax rate this year may cost us $2 next year to recover those revenues that are lost. I advocate against that. I stand by my recommendation. I think the conservative, appropriate approach this year is to recommend a no tax rate increase, and accordingly, because I'm advocating for an assessment, a reset, to take a look at our level of service and so forth, no additional net increase in full-time equivalent personnel, because those are two very major things that impact on the budget. We shared that at the last meeting. However, if the board desires any updates on things and options that might be there that we haven't dwelled on before, we're certainly willing to discuss that. I have looked at what examples that could be like that, and I've communicated the thinking there, just as minor tweaks, if we get into that some people might consider insignificant, but to others it might be considered significant. That type of thing I'm glad to respond to, and Jewel and I, to the best of our ability, will respond to that if the council is interested in entertaining anything other than the original recommendation that is before you. If that's a long answer to a short question, and I apologize.
I'm ready to expand on that.
Okay.
So,
Well, Jewel and I have researched it and looked at what an example, just to show you how this could happen, whether it be this calendar year, this fiscal year, or next fiscal year, or any thereafter. We constantly update the information and rethink some of the things, but I'll be frank, I don't believe there's an option on the table that wouldn't cause us real heartburn and more seriously, real concern going forward after this year, that would threaten and possibly trigger a tax rate increase in a subsequent year. Because I think that's a bad planning. That's not good for you nor good for us administratively to look at things that matter. It might get some favor this year, but if you double it next year, you're not going to be in favor any longer. So I think that would be a real mistake. And if you're talking about in terms of that kind of significant change, I don't have a plan to that. The most I could see would be a minor tweak, such as adjusting a tax rate to an even number rather than a quarter or less than a penny. That certainly can be accomplished. Again, is it significant enough you want to do that? I've asked Jewel to take a look at that, and she has a response to me for that, and I'm more than happy for her to share that with the board.
yeah, and Mr. Martin, that's what I would like to consider and maybe expand on it. There was 3 of us on the ballot last year, and I think we have voiced our concern last Tuesday, and I'm going to voice it again today. I think we need to consider anything and everything, and I would like to see if your thoughts and your opinion, if we could flatten it to 34 cents. If we could reduce it 0.25.
I thought you said 35.
And no, I'm correcting myself very quickly. But if we did the 0.25, I mean, is that out the question? At least our citizens would know we're listening to them, we hear them. It would not put us in a drastic situation within the budget if you and Jewel could comment on that. And then I like your idea of resetting. I think it's time for a reset. And that's why we're highly favored of putting you in the position that we put you in to give you that opportunity. So I do like the idea of resetting. So could you please show us if we could flatten this to a 34 cent across the...
To my request, and as usual, Jewel's ahead of the game. This has not been shared with the board, though. I quickly point that out to those that might say, wow, that's amazing, he already had that ready. This was not necessarily, it's just one way of looking at it, and this is one way that it could be done and not compromises in future years. If you're interested in doing something of this nature, and I'll defer to Jewel to just review quickly the minimum number of items that she's identified.
Okay, can I clarify one thing first? So it would affect us in future years, however, it doesn't, these don't affect ongoing, recurring annual
That's
operations.
excellent clarification. I appreciate you doing that, Jewel, because I did not want to mislead anyone that it always has an impact. If you collect less revenue or you spend more, then you're going to have some future impact. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so the first one we've got listed up here is a small portion of contingency reduction. Contingency is there for emergency times that we need to pull funds, something major goes, happens, it needs to be repaired, or it also during like hurricanes and stuff like that, if we need to immediately start storm prep, it allows the manager, if it's a true emergency, to start working on items and then report it to council at the next meeting. The second one is the annual street ends and alleyways surveying.
Can I ask? So how much from the 378,820?
It would go to 348 and change,
It would go to 348 and change, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
which is still, you never have enough in these kind of categories, to be honest, but as Jewel pointed out, that is one that might cover some emergency type expenditures, but we wouldn't obviously cover anything extraordinary like a hurricane kind of event in and of itself, but it gives us wiggle room for those smaller events that might occur throughout the year.
And also just, so I believe it's Local Government Fiscal Control Act suggests budgeting contingency anywhere from 3 to 5%, 5% being the maximum. Our contingency at 378,820 is less than 2%.
Puts it in perspective.
The second one is annual street ends and alleyways surveying. Currently, there's 62,000 in the budget. Removing 37,000 still leaves 25,000. And then the last one, we have a reduction in the budget dealing with some of the recreation center revenue in anticipation of the construction that will be going on. So it's viewed as a one-time reduction in that revenue, so you could do a one-time appropriation to offset that reduction of 39,548 because that revenue should come back in the year 2028. And the three of those together is 0.0025. Yes, a quarter of a penny.
Quarter of a penny.
Yeah, one footnote I would quickly add, I'm not advocating that you do this, but this is one way that it could be done, and might be other ways. It also, though, this does fly in the face of my original comment that we have a great deal of uncertainty at the legislative level in Raleigh on what the next round of limitations and other things that impact on our ability to levy the property tax rate in general. That bothers me a lot. The economy, we can argue all day about how that's going to fare, but I think my gut's telling me I see some scary similarities to what we're going through right now on a national and particularly state and regional level that we did a decade and a half ago, when we did see a time when property tax values went down and the city had to raise the rate to make it up. And I don't know how that plays out looking ahead, if the General Assembly is going to somehow change the formulas to where cities have less flexibility to react to those kind of changes. I really am concerned about that, and I'd be less than honest if I didn't bring that to your attention. Other than that, I like easy math. It's a little easier to keep up with, but and it would be a reduction. Obviously, minimal impact on depending on your perspective to a lot of folks, but it may send some type of message, hopefully the message that would be intended, that the city is trying to do its best to respond to difficult times. But that's the only qualifiers I would add, and I'm certainly available to hear all opinions on that, and I encourage you to debate it.
Thank you.
Jewel, if you would. I feel like I'm John Nelson. I got all these markers, and I can't find the page I'm looking for. So if you or Leanne would locate the page that it shows our tax rate at 34.25 for this year, and then it looks at that tax rate for the next coming budget year, and it's like 36 point something. There is an increase already formulated in this. Could you find that page?
Yeah, I know, you can probably tell us.
And then let me make a comment to remind people in the audience while they're looking. It's,
Yes,
The model.
it's in the model.
Yeah, that's probably.
That's where it's at, Bill, is in the model.
well, I found it in both places, but I think it's in here too.
What page did you say that was? 65.
Oh,
Okay. Page 65 will do great for the point that I want to make.
That's in
When we charge Jewel and the finance department in making a flat budget, Jewel and Leanne and their staff understood immediately that they were being told to absorb the inflation rate for this coming year. And the inflation rate has been around 3%. In addition to that, Jewel challenged her staff to reduce the budget another 3%. So there's a 6% swing in estimated expenses and revenue. We also learned that when we adjust the property tax rate, if I understood earlier today, that the county sales tax distribution is likely to drop. So we're gonna get a hit in sales tax revenue with a 0.25% reduction.
true.
We got the state saying, now, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't do property revaluation or in some way artificially cap it, so we don't have big ugly surprises. We have no idea what that's going to look like. That is an element of risk that I think a responsible council and a responsible staff responsible for putting the budget together has to factor in. Finally, Randy pointed out clearly that we need to reset. We need to think about doing smarter with less and maximizing our return on whatever investment we make. That is something that we have to do. Randy has been here. Have you been here a month? Hell no.
No,
You came May 1st.
I volunteered for a little while, but no, in official capacity, you're right.
So we need to give him time to take a clean look at whether we have too many people on the payroll, our overtime and part-time coefficients are high. There are other areas that we point out that we could get significant money if we go about it in a logical, planned manner to reset what we're doing. I sat down and said, okay, if we save the 0.25% that George talked about on a $250,000 house, you're gonna save off of that citizen's tax bill $6.25. If it's $500,000 house, you're gonna do $12.50. I understand $12.50 is $12.50. But for the risk that I've described earlier, is that worth taking the chance? Or would it be better to have a more conservative objective that we keep this tax rate level at 34.25 and work diligently to keep that tax rate level all the way through the next budget year? And that gives us time to implement and reset the changes that I think Randy sees the need for, and I certainly see it. So my proposal would be, keep the rate flat. It does not give you enough bang for the buck to decrease it. Reset what we're doing and proceed. So I have a different approach than George. I will say that George's idea reads a lot better in the paper.
I promise you,
But
that's
we
not why I'm
have-
doing it, Bill.
But we have the responsibility as councilmen to keep Morehead City on a firm financial footing and minimize risk. And I think my proposal is the better proposal.
But we
That's
also,
my comment.
thank you, Councilman Taylor, but we also have a responsibility to not run our long-time residents out of town. We have a lot of citizens living on fixed incomes. So the latest property value increases and also the latest property tax increase that we implemented over the last 2 years have negatively impacted them. So on one hand, I agree with you with maintaining essential services. On the other hand, I agree with Councilmember Baloo. We have to do something to alleviate the tax burden of our citizens that have been greatly impacted by this.
My point is that 1250 is not gonna run you.
I would like to say, city manager, you're doing the prudent thing. And when I say that, if you had done anything other than this, I would have been questioning your judgment. When you come into something new that you have just come upon, you have to put a pause on everything. You gotta stop and look, okay? I think that's what you've done. When I hear you mention your concerns of the future over, what, 0.25 cents, whatever that may be, to me, I'm impressed when you start talking 1 and 2 and 3 cents, okay? But we're not talking risking that. We're talking, can somebody give me, what is it, 0.2 cents? Can somebody give me that right now?
100,000.
Okay. So what I'm saying to you is, I understand where you are with this, because we have got to look over a lot of things right now. Mr. Taylor just made some good points. There's some things that you can't possibly know, being at the time you've been here. So to do a pause, to put the brakes on, I think is a very wise move, because we do have time to really look over the things, as Mr. Taylor has just suggested. We may have to do some different things that are not very comfortable to some, but it gives you time to look at it. So a pause and doing what you have mentioned, I think is very good sound judgment. I think that I'm in support of it, by the way. A good pause And I want to say thank you very much for being able to come back, because I know you've had pressure to do something different, but I think you're doing the right thing. If you have, you've been hired to lead this town to do the right thing for us, and that's your opinion, and so I'm going to trust your judgment. So I'm going to say thank you very much.
So you're saying keep it at
Keep it at 34.25.
But do our citizens, that can no longer afford to live here in Morehead City, do they have time to adjust? That's my question.
I don't think, now, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, if you can show me some people that are gonna have to leave here, show them to me and I will pay their taxes,
That's a bold statement.
okay? So if they say they can't live here, I'll take care of that for the year.
That's a bold statement, Councilman Walker. All I'm saying is, we need to get creative. And I know Mr. Randy just coming on board, and, I agree with what he's saying. Because going forward in the future, just setting a tax rate this year and holding it there for 3 to 4 years would be ideal until the next revaluations by the county. But also,
Hold on, Mr. Mayor,
know.
we're not talking about that now. Next year, we might be looking for a decrease. I'm not waiting on no reval.
Let me put it real clear what I would think. Randy needs 6 months to work with the staff.
Exactly.
Look at what are potential spots that we could improve and have those ready to put in action when you begin your budget in January for the January 27, 28 budget. That's not 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years down the
No,
line.
no, sir.
If we're serious about resetting it, it is now. And now is, he's gotta have some time to sort of get his act together and make some recommendations.
Don't kick the crutch out from underneath of them at this point. You know, I'm in agreement with what Bill and Harvey is saying. I think this year we need to leave it at 34.25. And I know that's not a popular view. I think it's a prudent view. I'm concerned with the contingency, because we're one hurricane away from a disaster, so to speak, and I just don't. That needs to stay in there. There's no doubt in my mind. And I thought we were a little better than 2%. I thought we were closer to 3%, but I heard you say we're less than 2%. 1.4. So okay. So I think we do owe it to Mr. Martin to look into these things and see where it takes us next year. And so that's my feelings on it.
According to page 65,
Go ahead.
we would add 4 cents to the rate in budget year
2028.
2028 if we don't do anything except continue. Randy has described the need to reset and rethink what we're doing. Our goal should be keep it manageable at 34.25 and make sure or try the best we can to whittle away on the shortfall that's facing us in 2028 and beyond.
And no disrespect to Mr. Martin, what he's presented, and he's done a great job, and to Jewel and Dan and everyone else. And I'm not trying to get my name in the headlines of the paper. That does not matter to me. I just know what I've heard, and I've also asked Mr. Martin to put together something, if we could flatten this rate out to 34 even. And yes, he's concerned, but it's not gonna, I just don't see it's gonna drastically affect this budget of 0.25. And again, I'm trying to to make it a point to let the citizens know that I'm listening. I care. I hear $12.50, I hear $6, and maybe it might not affect those of us on this dais, but it might affect some. And I think any improvement, you know, when we started out, we were looking at 2 cents, 800,000. Then I heard 1 cent, 400,000, and I don't think they're numbers we cannot achieve. But I cannot believe, and that I highly respect Jewel and Daniel and Randy. You can't tell me after a 30 to 40% increase of our tax rate last year that we cannot find 0.25 to show our citizens that we're listening, we care, and we're gonna do anything we can to reduce, and that's what we've done. So that is my opinion. I'm not saying it to discredit anyone on this dais or to be negative with anyone on this dais, but I just cannot believe that we started out at 12 cents last year and we ended up where we did, and now we're looking for 0.25. And that's why I've asked the question. And I just don't think it's an unrealistic number that we couldn't achieve to let our citizens know that we're listening to them. And that's my thoughts.
I think this is a time where we truly need to get creative. And some of my thoughts and ideas are going to be things that Mr. Randy and Jewel that we can look at exploring in the years ahead. And that are things like partnering with the county and, you know, reaching out to our state legislators about how we can broaden local sales taxes, things like that. So I know that those things are nothing immediate that can alleviate the tax burden. But I'm just looking for some sort of reduction. That's my goal, because I've heard from numerous citizens that have told me, Lee, can you guys please reduce the property tax rates? And I understand what you guys are saying, that we can't do a big cut, but any cut is showing our citizens that we're trying, and that we're trying to accommodate them in the best way possible. Because right now we're in a season where we have done some bold things, and I'm a part of it. So don't think that I'm separating myself from the board or staff, because I'm a part of it. I voted for a $8.2 million Parks and Recreation Center expansion. I voted to pass the budget last year to add public safety positions and several other positions. So I stand with you guys. But in the aftermath of all that, I also heard from citizens that say, Lee, this right now during this season of my life with property values doubling and tripling is just too much. And can you guys please do something? It seems like y'all just not listening to us. You're spending. And some of the decisions we made recently have been some bold decisions, and I stand with the council in those decisions, and I support the council. And I have actually went on social media, you know, supporting the council in their decisions. So to not even look at an attempt to accommodate the citizens by doing any kind of reduction is inexcusable. And that's just my thoughts.
I think, with all due respect, I think we have looked at it, and we are looking at it, but again, my personal opinion is, it's not gonna make, you know, $6, $12, what is that gonna do? Other than, okay, we reduced the tax rate. Beaufort says they reduced their tax rate. How much did they reduce their tax rate to?
Yeah, only a fraction.
But just to say we reduced the tax rate, at the detriment of possibly the town, I still think my heart's a heart that we need to give this man a chance to look at it, to dive into it, and see what we can come up with next year. Because I think we might be surprised. I really do.
I hope so, Councilman Abel. I hope we are surprised for next year, and I'm certainly,
And I don't know, and I don't mean to cut you off,
Yeah,
but I don't know, I know I follow what the state government is doing. And a lot of the things that Mr. Martin is talking about is true. And Sandy got me on this back 2 years ago. I go to their page every day, looking at the committees to see what they're doing. And you're right, there's a couple of things that are really detrimental to this town, or could be. And those things are liable to happen this year. So,
yeah, there has got to be we've got to allow Mr. Martin a reset and staff a reset and to look at this, and then there's got to be some educational, over the next year,
That's
because,
important, too.
you know, if our citizens want the reduction of the tax rate that some of us have heard, I mean, I've heard 10 cent, I've heard 5 cent. Well, if that's the kind of reduction that our citizens are wanting, then there's going to be a reduction of service. And if we start reducing services, then that's going to come at a cost too. So
And your
again,
survey showed what?
what's that?
The survey that, Jill presented showed what?
I understand.
The services were for, safety, life
Yes.
and safety.
Yes, out of 60 people, out of 10,000.
Well, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, I know. So again, I understand. I'm just looking at any possible way that, and you can say it's for theatrics, for newspaper, whatever. I'm just looking, and what my heart's telling me to reduce it at 0.25. I certainly do not believe that us reducing the tax rate 0.25 is going to put this city in any kind of travesty.
But
But that's my thoughts and my opinion and my heart telling me what I'm thinking, and I certainly respect the other three of you. But I wish we could show some kind of reduction and then give Mr. Martin and our staff time to reset and hopefully come back with some positive numbers, and maybe things will not look as bleak as what we're kind of thinking, and we can do a little bit more next year. But I certainly, I stake my name that I don't believe reducing this tax rate a quarter of a cent is going to put this city in any kind of jeopardy. That's my thoughts and my opinion.
Jewel, I talked earlier about for you to get to the number, that's in this book. We already reduced it by the cost of living adjustment. The inflation, we're absorbing part of that in order to get the numbers you're able to get. So that's one reduction. In addition to absorbing the inflation rate, you also reduced another 3%. So it's not that the council and the staff haven't heard the citizens. We've taken 6% out of what the budget could have been. That's savings. Now, does an extra $100,000 make that much difference? I don't think so. I'd rather take the conservative approach. We know we got big changes coming. We know Randy needs to reset. We've got to change the way we have been doing things, and that takes time. Don't dig the hole deeper. Give Randy an opportunity to do his management magic and get us a better product going forward. He deserves that time.
So there's, let's look to page 7, Mr. Randy and Jewel. I just got a few questions.
What page?
Page 7.
7?
Yeah, in the budget booklet.
Page 7.
In the message, is that, in the message?
No, it's right in the budget booklet, page 7, and it's right on the, capital expenditure funds. I have circled here, some highlights of this year's capital planning include approximately $4 million in fleet vehicles, equipment, street paving, land and structure purchases, water and utility upgrades, and include over $0.73 million in grant funding and prior year cost savings. So I have a question about the $4 million in fleet vehicles. Is there any way where we can explore a reduction in that price, like identifying underutilized vehicles, eliminating excess vehicles and things like that?
That would be part of that deep dive. If I could just give a general comment, would be part of that reset or self-assessment or look at where we stand in terms of our rolling stock and where we stand in terms of condition. And I think that there potentially could be some leeway there in terms of replacement schedules, things like that. But I don't know that will be a quick fix. That's probably more longer term if you manage that activity. I'll defer to Jewel if she's got specifics she wants to share.
And so I don't know if you were, obviously, that's always something good to do, but if you were talking about as far as the tax rate goes, all of that is funded with fund balance. None of the tax revenue is going towards that piece of the budget, towards the capital.
The proposed levy would not generate it unless there's money left over at the end of the year is the only way it would, or we run a deficit, from our projections, which both are possibilities. I mean, that happens from time to time with things we don't control. And as good as this lady is and her staff in doing it, it's not an exact science. It is a difficult process to hit the target. But that is the best answer we've got today, Mayor, but we'll work on any other additional thoughts as we go forward.
Council have any?
But that is a good thing to point out, because novice may be looking at the budget outside, looking in, might misinterpret those kind of things and not know the inner workings and the inter-fund impacts. There are general fund expenses, for example, that we share across all funds, things of that nature that would play into that.
Yeah.
Remember that Randy and Joe, when this budget is approved, their net budget experience, in order to prevent a 4-cent increase in the tax rate for 28, you've got to find about $1.6 million worth of operating expense or new revenue to accomplish a flat rate. That's a tall order. And Randy's got to have some time, along with the staff, to come up how we're going to dig that.
And I'm ready for that challenge. That was one comment I was going to make, and just for edification of others that might be following this discussion, is I'm not a savior, and I'm not someone that can. The magic, as was referred to, I'll do all I can, but the realities are going to be the realities. But there are some approaches and some experience we've had in the past that will hopefully help us close that gap. But the bare realities are that, there's other forces at work that may be working against us. In that regard, though, I do want to say that there are some things that I see as opportunities in that regard that I'm not going to prejudge. But one thing I want to point out to the public, it's been pointed out that manager is desiring this opportunity to reset and assess, but the city council is going to be actively engaged throughout this period, because in the final analysis, anything that comes down to setting policy or service levels is your responsibility, and I'm not going to usurp that or in any way give the public the belief that I'm going to make that final judgment. It's going to come to this city council on a regular basis with updates so that you're part of the process, and you're not going to hear about it at the end of that 6-month period that was mentioned. In fact, I think some of these decisions might have to be done in advance of budget time. So I'm intending this to be an engagement that's going to start relatively soon. It's already started in my head now. And so looking ahead, though, in reality, when we get into some of this with more time, I don't anticipate that, but I also know historically, we have been able to achieve what the mayor and Councilman Taylor pointed out, in being able to try to hold those tax rates as long as we can. Sometimes it was a divine intervention possibly, but most of the time it was prudent, conservative budgeting and down to the brass tacks of what is a need and what is a want, those kind of determinations. And then collectively, this management team, this staff that you've assembled that's so well versed and talented, creativity and citizen feedback will not be left out of it either. So we want to use the things we talked about earlier to engage the citizens so that you make the most informed decision at the next budget cycle and the next budget cycle as possible. So I thank you for the opportunity. That may sound crazy. Why would anybody want to do it? But I'm motivated and ready to go and looking forward to that next step. But that does bring us back. No decision has to be made today. I've enjoyed your dialogue and debate, your civil debate about viewpoints. I would highly encourage the council in the days ahead that you all think hard about that. My goal always is to try to build consensus among the elected officials. And I hope that you can reach consensus on this very important topic, which is almost as important as a lot of other things we can do for public perception about how we're doing at this job. It's not easy of managing this city with all the intricacies and the other constituency groups we have and special interests and not so special interests. From the top to the bottom, we all need to really think through that and represent the best of our ability. And I look forward to joining each of you because I know you all took an oath to do your part, and I join you in that.
Let me ask the question. We have two proposals on the table, two different looks at a solution to the problem. And Randy asked us to talk about as a group, is this the end of the line, or do we need a third meeting? If we don't need a third meeting, we've got basically the ideas in option A or option B already on the table. Is it appropriate to ask for a motion on the budget and see if we have an approval, or do we need the third meeting? What is the opinion of the group?
I would not recommend you do that before your public hearing.
No.
But a consensus.
Premature.
Attorney was in the room. I don't know if he left, but it, yeah, you got to have that before you take formal action.
Probably misphrased.
Consensus discussion about what else you need or what I don't see any problem with that. I'll defer to Jewel if she wants to add.
You're referring to the third budget workshop?
Yes.
Okay.
That part you can get a consensus on. I don't know, it was listed, the clerk did verify as if necessary. So I don't think you'd have to formally take a motion to do that. You certainly can do that. Or it
So
could be
these are
part
the
of your-
two options we're gonna present for voting at the next council meeting.
Yeah, the budget hearing, that'll be June 9th.
No, I don't think, and I don't mean to, I don't think it's the two options. I just think we just had some good discussion today. I think the public will hear what we've discussed, and then we'll have a public hearing and, give them an opportunity to voice, but, I just think I think we've just had good discussions of where we're at, and what we're thinking.
So we're ready for the public comment.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. And I really hate this for Councilman Chambers, because I know he had this vacation scheduled before we appointed him in this position, but I certainly think it's unfair not to give him an opportunity to have at some discussion before he is asked to vote on this thing in a few weeks. I'm very concerned with that. I just don't, I mean, he's actually gonna have to raise his hand and vote for this thing up or down, and he's not been a part of any of the discussion, and it's certainly not been his fault because he had a vacation scheduled with his family before we appointed him and these work sessions. So
I think it's a fair concern.
it,
I think it's a fair concern to ask Randy and staff how they can bring him up to speed.
I was gonna suggest that, the alternative, rather than the whole board sit here and go back through it, I think it would be a more productive exercise if that would be your only reason to hold a third workshop, as was listed as if necessary. We, through staff, Jewel and I briefly discussed it, I think we can give him a more in-depth update on everything that was discussed. Of course, he'd have access to be able to hear and see and read and hear these discussions. But I think we can answer here, because he did give us some feedback before he left administratively on some of his initial thoughts after having reviewed the document, because he did have that for the public's consumption. He saw the proposed, he had observations, and he and I interacted and discussed those. But I think there've been several other things shared with you, such as the items tonight and at the last workshop that he was unable to attend. I think we can, through staff, get him, if he has the time when he gets back before the public hearing, I think it's a week, maybe, something like that. If he has the time and is willing to do that, which I believe he would be, we can accomplish probably more than would be ahead at that workshop immediately upon his return. If you,
Yeah, I think it'll be a disservice to, Councilman Chambers, but also a disservice to the citizens if he doesn't partake in this process at all. That was one of the main reasons why I reached out to our city clerk about rescheduling the third, budget workshop meeting from May 26th to June the 2nd, is to give Councilmember Chambers opportunity to take part in these discussions. And I know it's gonna look like, you know, having a third meeting, we're just rehashing the same old thing, but he may certainly want to bring some things to the table that, you know, council may say, hey, you know what, that's a good idea, and that'll change the whole, you know, trajectory of you guys' decision-making going forward ahead of the budget hearing. So I would like for him to participate in a workshop in the public view, not behind closed doors with staff, so we can get his thoughts and opinions.
one other option, Mayor, other than a full board committee meeting, just as another option I just thought of, is we could do it through our committee format where either finance or whoever have him at that meeting to help too, if that's an alternative, if you don't want to hold a full board workshop.
I have a question. If we're having, does everybody have to come to the meeting if we've already been there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're one body. It's five of you
If
guys.
it's a council meeting.
Yeah, it's a council meeting, it's five of y'all.
But if you,
I got one meeting for him, so I gotta come because he's not here.
or we could do a committee meeting where other members could be present and just not participate if you, just to listen or whatever. That's just a third option I thought about. We could do it administratively, and that would be a public meeting. We can make any of them public for that matter, to satisfy that need, because it is a very, very unique situation
It is, right?
that I've never quite experienced. So,
Yeah, it's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to appoint a council person to fill that seat, is to have them take part in the budget process. And I wasn't aware that Mr. Chambers had a prior commitment for vacation with his family, and that's all good and fine. But I at least wanted him to participate in at least one meeting, one budget workshop meeting before he has the vote on June 9th.
I mean, that's the concern and that I have is, if we were not gonna let him be part of the discussion and the dialogue of the budget, then we should have not appointed until after the budget was done. But now we have appointed him before the budget is done, and he had a conflict with a family vacation, and now we're not going to let him engage in the budget process. It is a very unique situation, Mr.
Let
Martin.
me ask you a question. Are these meetings being filmed?
Yeah, they are. They're being recorded.
Or can he not watch the recording?
Yeah, he can.
Uh,
I mean, he could get caught up by watching the recording. He may not be able to speak at each one, but he can see what happened at each one. I mean, that's just a suggestion. I mean,
One other, Jewel, this proud of me, that's why we have smart people around us. What if we reach out to him and get his input,
Good
if we
idea.
can reach him by phone or whatever, and between now and, because you can leave it on the calendar, and if Sean's able to reach him, or I'll talk to him, and we'll sort of explain where we're at and see what his preference would be and share that with the board, and the mayor could cancel the workshop prior to it, or multiple members of the board may desire that, and we could do it either way.
Yeah, I think that would be ideal.
So, Mr. Martin, we've got a public hearing the night of our June council meeting, correct? And then after the public hearing, then we can either vote, we can vote on the budget, be prepared to vote on the budget, or schedule another meeting to any additional information. We've got that opportunity.
I've actually done that before. We've had a workshop either just prior to the regular meeting or after the public hearing, where the board would continue its dialogue before you take formal action. So there's multiple opportunities here, and we can
Yes, sir.
explain those and get his input.
I mean, and we could always do that, just cancel this meeting next Tuesday, and then have our public hearing, and then if it's up to the council to continue or vote on it on that night. 'Cause
As long as we do
we've
it-
certainly got the option of
Well,
continuing
and
it.
that's what we did last year, if you remember.
Yeah.
Open up the meeting,
Right.
and then public comment, then we spent 90 minutes.
How many motions, Councilman Davis?
10.
Say 10 or
10.
12.
It was
Well,
10.
I'm looking for 2 max this year.
I think Ty documented 10 in the newspaper.
So why don't we just, I mean, let's just do that. I mean, let's just have the
Well,
public hearing, and then,
But I think it's prudent that Mr. Martin and Jewel talk to him ahead of time. in one of the
Absolutely.
We can
committees.
communicate through staff
And
with
if-
him and
if,
give you. the
any of
feedback.
us want to attend, just let us know when that one would be,
Yeah.
and we can certainly sit in and obviously not participate, but.
Right.
And we can call him and see if he has any other input before and share that with the whole board.
I don't have, as long as he has an opportunity to comment and,
You actually have more flexibility during the budget process unless North Carolina's changed the law since I last worked with it on this. You can continue meetings, you can do pretty much anything you want to.
until June 30th,
Yeah.
correct?
And that-
Yeah, and we don't want to go to the 30th. Let's not do that.
Mr.
This thing
Martin, we're not
starts the first, so let's do it as soon as possible, or Jewel will have my neck.
And he asked you some good questions that
He
you shared with
did,
us.
and
so-
they were very thoughtful.
Yeah.
Obviously, he read it cover to cover,
Yeah.
as all of you have, and so I was very impressed with that. He knew that he was at a disadvantage if he didn't, so I appreciate that. And we did have a significant verbal exchange on some of his questions. Of course, as he pointed out, some of his input was for the reset period.
Right.
Because we talked a little bit about that window for the next fiscal year, that aren't things that could be done for this budget because of the amount of effort some of them would require. This is a very healthy discussion. I really respect the way y'all have approached it, and I thank you for that. I think it sends the right message to the community that we're working this as best we can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I don't think this is gonna be a process that's gonna be prolonged. 'Cause I think if we left it up to Councilmember Taylor, he's ready to pass the budget today.
No, we can't. We can't.
No,
do
so
that.
we're gonna wait till June 9th, but definitely support the council in their decision, even if I have a difference of opinion. So thank you, guys. All right, so moving on from the budget discussion, we're gonna go ahead and open up the floor for public comment. If any citizen would like to come to the podium, please state your name and address, and you have a 3-minute time limit.
Now, Mayor, is this just on the budget, or are you gonna have any comment?
Oh, this is just on the budget.
Okay.
And the discussion that we had today. any feedback any citizen would like to give. But Mr. Jimmy?
Thank you. James H. Walker Jr., 1503 Bay Street, Morehead City, North Carolina. This question goes to Mr. Martin. I was reading the paper, Carter County News Times, and you had compared other municipalities with the same size as Morehead City. But I think you made an assumption that might not have been true, because these municipalities all are governed by their local county commissioners. So we could not tell unless you went back to find out if there was a second year in reevaluation, the fourth year, or fifth year, or eighth year. We were in the eighth year, our evaluation came up. So unless you really went back and looked at each one individually, make sure the evaluations were done at that time, you could not make those assumptions that we were in alignment with most of the counties outside, or cities outside.
That's a fair assessment, Mr. Walker.
So you have to know when the counties were reevaluated.
You want to comment on that, or?
Okay.
I
Next
think it
question.
was, if I'm understood him correctly, if I may respond to that,
Yes.
since it was directed to me.
Loud.
Mr. Walker, it's good to see you again. Glad you're participating. Any analysis we do, that's a very good point. We need to be sure to have an explanation or disclaimer, if you will, that it's based on what's published in terms of it. And there are variables that certainly differ from time to time, whether revaluation would be one significant factor. It also has other factors that could be, that make them different and potentially skew. But I think we used as a resource for some of that online resources, but also the League of Municipalities who collects that data, and we use that to keep up with what communities our size and throughout the state and region. Sometimes we do direct contacts with them, but that's a very valid point, and maybe that's another tweak we can do to see where they're at. Because actually in North Carolina, you can go up to 8 years, as you well know, without a revaluation. So it can dramatically change how the rate might be structured. There are other factors like what is the average property value and things of that nature.
3 minutes.
Oh, we stopped.
That was my response. I'm not taking your 3 minutes. I apologize. That certainly wasn't intended to take up your time.
Second question. The capital outlay for W.S. King and the utilities bill, is all that in one fiscal year, or is that over 2 or 3 fiscal years?
I'll let Jewel respond.
So it was laid out in the capital improvement plan. It was not budgeted for until the financing was done. So we record the revenue coming in from the bank, and then it's expensed, as we build the building. Local government works a little bit different also. That's in our capital project. In our general fund, you have to budget annually for the debt payment, including principal and interest. So that's every year.
My simple question is it over 1 fiscal year or 2 or 3 fiscal years?
For the debt that's on the books, or for the debt payment, which is an expense, even the principal, which is different than corporate accounting, it's over 15 years.
15 years, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Jimmy.
Mr. Walker.
Okay. Mr. Luther? Oh, take your time. How you doing, Miss Hannah?
Councilman, Mr. Martin, good to see you back.
Mr. Tootle, it's a pleasure to see you out and about.
Yes, sir. Mr. Martin from years ago. My name is Luther Tootle, and I live at 2532 Mayberry Loop Road, but I own property in Morehead City. That's why I'm here today. One of the things I want to speak about is the dollars and cents. I'm speaking from the people in the community that live there. And I'm going to use an example. I paid $500 in tax 2 years ago. I paid $1,000 this year. This is what the people are looking at. They're not looking at, you have to take that money and divide it out to each department or wherever it goes. But this is, I know Bill Taylor says $12 and $6. But if I paid $500 then 1 year and then turn around and pay $1,000 next year, that's not $12. That's not $6. And I know the value of the property has increased. That's where I'm coming from now. Now that the property value has increased, I'm paying more taxes. Then there should be more money available in your caucus to work with to give Mr. Martin something to work with. I'm just saying should be, based on the dollar figure. I've been through and talked with several people in the community, and they all complain about the same thing. My taxes is double. My property value went from $160,000 to $385,000. Appeal rating, it dropped up $76,000, but I still had to pay that tax. There's still more money going into the caucus. So my question to you tonight, is that money coming to the county, or is the city getting their share of it? If the city's getting their share, you're going to have more money this year than you had years in the past. And based on the number of houses in Morehead City, if they were all taxed like that, there should be enough revenue out there to take care of anything this city needs to do, if that's where it's supposed to be. Now, if my share of $500 above what I paid last year is not getting to you, then I think somewhere we need to take a look at that. I think we need to look at that, because that's the dollars and cents, and that's what the average person out there are looking at. They're not looking at your job as to how you develop your rates. They don't know that. They don't come down to hear that. But they know that they spent more money, twice as much money in this year to pay taxes than they did last year. And that's the only thing I want to bring for you to take a look at. And Mr. Matt Stiles, he can tell you the same thing that the people are talking about. So I'd like you to take that into consideration, because somewhere there's some money out there. Whether you get it or not, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luther. Is there anyone else out in the audience who would like to speak? Okay, Andrea.
Hi, Andrea Syback, 4105 Sound Drive. I've got some probably disjointed thoughts. We'll try to put it together, and we'll go home, hopefully. Couple things. We can't have nice things and not pay to have them, right? Like, I get that. Some of the comments are kind of in direct conflict. Our public safety officers, our fire EMS are not cheap, right? And we want a safe town. Fortunately, unfortunately, we have to pay for that. We talk about taking a quarter cent off of our taxes. For me, I believe I did the math. It could be anywhere between $30 and $60 difference. Could I put that back into our community, into our small businesses? Yes. But I do understand that it takes money to run the city the way that we deserve. And so there's that. And so I applaud you all for trying to do something for the city. I think for me, as long as it doesn't go up, right, I think I can be okay with that. Obviously, I'm not talking for everyone else. I'm talking for maybe myself and maybe my network and my neighbors. I also agree that we should get feedback year-round on the budget, if possible. That also takes resources, which is also money. I also, encourage our council members as well to potentially get that feedback on their own, expanding their network, maybe having their own listening sessions as well to inform yourselves, and also really be in touch with our residents. And there was one other thing, and I completely forgot. So my apologies. I will probably send feedback to our wonderful staff members, and you'll see me at the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any other citizens that would like to speak? All right. Hearing none, seeing none, meeting adjourned.